Welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast. Scott, how you going, man?
Fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing really good, thank you. We just had a bit of a shift in weather here. I'm looking forward to getting over to some warmer weather next week.
What are the temperatures like down there right now?
Right now, it's supposed to be a lot warmer, Scotty. It's now today, well, I'm complaining, but it's a top of 20 degrees Celsius. But in the morning, right now, it was 14 degrees Celsius and feels like 9 degrees Celsius. So it's supposed to be around about 80 to 90, if that makes sense today, but it's not going to.
Yeah.
Hence my jumper.
It's like 40 to 70 or 45 to 70 Fahrenheit, something like that.
Yeah. So whereabouts are you, Scotty?
I'm in Dallas, Texas. Yeah,
Okay.
We're coming. I mean, the weather here is all over the place. The wintertime, it could be freezing for a week and a half straight, or in the summer, it's 110. It's pretty extreme.
It's interesting that I got students of mine that live for people listening from Australia, in Canberra, where I would say it's kind of like a mini Texas as in its climate, where in winter it's just absolutely freezing cold, too cold to play golf to a degree, right? And then in summertime, it's just too hot to play golf. And it's really hard for them to kind of get that balance.
Last summer was the first time that I've ever been like, okay, it's too hot to play in the afternoon. I normally have historically always loved it, but it's finally, I turned 50 last year and I'm finally surrendering to anything over 100 for 4 straight hours.
I actually have a question about that, right? And I agree with that, right? I've noticed, and my friend Stephen Giuliano as well, was talking to him about you coming on the podcast, and he wanted to know about this as well. Since you've come back to playing now, what have you noticed differently compared to when you played before professionally? Because when I mean come back, I noticed that you seem to be going down the competitive route. Is that correct? What changes have you seen in your game, and how are you approaching it differently?
Well, honestly, it really starts all the way back. I won't waste too much of our time with my full story, but I played all the sports growing up through high school. Really didn't focus on golf until about my junior year. So I didn't really play much tournament golf or anything like that. And went to a good school for golf here and everything. And then played professionally, I would say successfully while not being successful. I mean, I won 10 different times, like 72-hole events, not just, I mean, like I was competitive, had some Korn Ferry status for a while. But to your point, I quit playing in 2001, started an electricity company in 2002, and ran that. It went fairly well. And in about 2007, I was missing playing golf. I just did 100-hour weeks, 2002 through 2006. Just all I did was work. And then I finally was like burnt out, depressed, cynical. I was a train wreck. And I was like, okay, I got to play some more golf. Yeah. So I started playing again. That's right when I met Chris Como, actually. I was playing a lot of poker too. And Como and I met playing in an underground poker room here in Dallas.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was really pretty funny, actually. We were friends for like a year, and then finally I was like, what do you do for a living? He's like, I'm a golf instructor. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I played professional golf. It had just literally never come up. It's crazy. But so 2007, end of 6, I started playing more, and I started playing well really quick, like just hitting it well. I was working with Como, understanding just modern ball flight laws. Like the human body, I'm 6'1", 225. Like I'm a pretty big athletic guy. And the human body is just amazing, though. When you tell it the right thing to do, it's pretty good at doing it. Now, if you tell it the wrong thing to do, like face pointed right of target and swing left, and that's how you hit fades, somehow the body figures it out. Like, that's not right. I don't know why you think that's right, but I'm going to do it the right way. But so then in 2007, I decided or 2008 rather, I decided I was going to play like full-time, amateur golf. I was going to really try to get my game in shape. My electricity company was kind of running itself at that point. And I was going to, ultimately, I got to where I was playing good enough. I was like, you know what, I'm going to enter Q school as a 35-year-old amateur. And the reason when I did that, when I went out with one of my buddies to dinner one night, and he's like, man, you're really playing good. Like, you're playing, honestly, probably as good or better than you were when you were a full-time playing professional. And you play like 2-3 times a week. Like, what gives? And I was like, to be perfectly honest, it's my abilities as a poker player now, understanding the math of decision making in poker, and most importantly for me, the fact that you just can't get mad. If you get mad, you're going to just start spewing your money away. And so you recognize very quick that's a bad idea. Now, how it never dawned on me as a hothead on the golf course that I'm spewing my money away by getting pissed off.
Yeah.
Literally never connected those dots. Like, this is just a bad idea. And I don't know if it's being a little bit older, a little bit less testosterone, maturing, meditating. I don't know what it is, but I'm way more stoic in life in the golf, which people are probably like, really? I've read your Twitter before. That doesn't seem very stoic. Okay, not on Twitter, but aside from that.
Yeah.
And so honestly, when your question of like back to playing, this goes all the way back to 2008. Like, Decade didn't start until 2014. Already though, in 2008, the punchline of the story is I was one of only, I think, 6 people out of thousands that made it through all 4 stages to get to the final stage of Q School. And I did that as a 35-year-old amateur that's, playing a couple times a week.
Yeah.
And it was just entirely about applying poker mindset to the game. And then that's the whole reason that I started really thinking about golf as a math problem. And then in 2011, I didn't know anything about ShotLink or anything. And then in 2011 was when they first released the strokes gained putting statistic.
Yeah.
And I wrote a lot on an online poker forum back in the day called 2+2. And they had a golf sub forum. And I wrote a post, thank God, in June of 2011 that was just titled, "Is drive for show, putt for dough really true?" Now, I did a bunch of really bad math in it because I didn't have access to everything at the time. But you can really, it's fun to go back and read it because you can really see the wheels turning in my head. And what's cool about it is there's 6 other guys from that sub forum alone that are now the directors of analytics in the NBA, Major League Baseball, and NFL. And then me. I mean, literally 9 guys were all in there bouncing ideas off each other.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to go back and look at the genesis of it. And then once I understood in 2013 that they were going to be releasing the entire strokes game, like, we still didn't even know that at the time. I was like, oh, at that point then, if I've got how many strokes it takes to hole out from anywhere on the course, and I've got the size of shot patterns from launch monitors, like, we can just solve this problem. It's no longer a mystery anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's really where people don't understand. There's like, this guy's just telling everyone to hit at the middle of the green. Like, not even close to telling people to hit at the middle of the green. I want you getting as aggressive on the shot as the constraints of the shot allow.
Yeah.
Meaning, how long is the shot? What are the surrounding hazards? What are the weather conditions? Because Mark Brody, who's way smarter than me, the guy that came up with the strokes gained stats, I have known this. This is what Decade does, but he actually then went in and proved it through ShotLink, is that quite often aiming right at the middle of the green is just as bad or worse as aiming directly at the flag.
Yes.
Because you're just kind of giving up on any of your profitable situations to be a little bit more aggressive. So there's an inflection point somewhere between the pin and the middle of the green where the optimal target is on, 75 to 90% of shots. It's not the middle of the green, and it's not at the flag.
Yeah.
And so really understanding the background of Decade, and that's what the spot we're trying to find as quickly and efficiently as possible is. And then, as much as anything, then from there it's being more committed to that target at the end of the day. I mean, Stuart Sink has obviously been a great golfer for his entire life.
Yeah.
And that guy, when he bought the app, he won for the first time in 12 years the next week. And what he said was just, it takes the confusion, a little bit of the mental energy to make these decisions, and the system makes it for you. Most importantly, though, then you're far more committed to those targets because, like, there's a reason I chose it. And your better players for sure at home will know this, but like, if you've got a 7-iron and the pin's 4 yards from the left edge of the green and there's a lake left, like, you're not an idiot. You know to aim right of that. But then most good players, I don't know what the point of being smart enough to aim away from a flag, but still dumb enough then to hope you pull it. Which I think most middle amateurs would be like, really? You aim away from it and then hope you pull it? Like, I think that's one of the main things that, like, Decade and modern strategy and expectation management allows you to commit to more is aiming away from a flag and then really trying to hit it there and trusting the variance of your shot pattern is what will do the work for you at the end of the day.
I think what you finished on there, right, with expectation management, I think is really a really good one. But what you're doing there is that you're offering clarity to the person to actually judge their expectation and management, aren't they? Like, they're not, like you say, the word confusion before. And then as soon as it's like any aspect of our life that, someone says do something, you're like, why? And they're like, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to do it. And then you see maybe a semi level of commitment, But if you give that person direct reason to why, if you do X, Y, Z, it's like some of the marketing campaigns, right? You will lose 30 pounds if you do X, Y, Z. Then people are like, okay, I'll do it. You know what I mean? So it kind of does give people clarity to kind of fire at that pin. But you mentioned and something triggered a good story in mine about hopefully you pull it when you hit it to a back left pin. A friend of mine who I used to play a bit of golf with, Mr. Craig Parry, when he holed out in the playoff hole and he held a 6-iron to that back left flag in a PGA Tour event and he pulled it. He pulled it 15 yards. Everyone's like,
well, that was, where Decade finally got launched was I did all this work in 2013 and 14. And then Will Zalatoris was a kid that I've known since he was 9 years old at my home course.
Yeah.
And he was struggling for years as a junior. And, I went and caddied for him. He won the Texas Salmon US Junior. And it's just funny looking back at it, the expectation management of it. But I bring up Will because when he was playing in the US Open in 2020, the one that DeChambeau won, who's the second player that I worked with after Will, since he went to college here in Dallas, Will hit the hole-in-one on whatever hole at Winged Foot. Winged Foot. And Sean Martin, the PGA Tour writer, tweeted, Will Zalatoris just hit a hole-in-one in the U.S. Open, and the only thing Scott Fawcett will want to talk about is that he wasn't aiming at the flag. And so I texted Will. I was like, what was your target? And he replied, 7 yards right of the pin. Yeah. And I just posted it because I'm like, that's important. Like, it's important to know that's not what he was aiming at. And what most people don't remember was later in the round, he hit another one that he was aiming 5 yards right of, and it actually hit the pin and just sat on the lip. He almost had 2 hole-in-ones in the first round of the U.S. Open where he wasn't aiming within 5 yards. I mean, 15 feet. He wasn't aiming within 15 feet of either one of them. I mean, that's what you just have to understand is, again, I'm not going to say it is luck, period. But the better you are, the tighter your shot pattern, the less lucky you have to get. Just like if you're rolling, 100 marbles down a path, the tighter the marble pattern is, the more like the hole would get in the way of it. So if you had like a golf hole out there and you had marbles that were 6 feet across, like only a few would hit it, but if they were only 12 inches apart, but it still would be lucky whichever ones actually hit the hole. Yeah. And that's what just people don't really want to understand and trust. I mean, it's expectation. One thing I was thinking about when you were talking earlier was once you know that an 8-foot putt on the PGA Tour is 50-50, it's literally a coin flip. Yeah. And so, yes, if you guess 3 or 4 coin flips in a row wrong, like if you guess one in a row wrong, you're just not going to think about it. You're going to guess again. Yeah. You start guessing 3 or 4, you're like, well, that's weird. And that would be the point in putting where it's like, well, I've missed 6 or 7 in a row. Like, maybe we need to work on our putting. But if you miss one, like, whatever, move on to the next hole. I mean, again, you use the data I use data for my PGA Tour players far more often to convince them they're not as bad at something than I do to find what they need to work on. For sure. Like
100%. But I think as well, what is challenging when you talk about that, right? When you talk about, on the PGA Tour that you're getting, say from 8 feet, it's 1.5, right? So 50-50. Is in practice, in a controlled environment though as well, do you sometimes like to make sure they're measuring that in practice as well? Because every 8-foot putt on the golf course is completely different, right? We've got Augusta coming up. Like I'm sure 8 foot from there versus, another tournament.
Shockingly, it's not as different as you would think.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it is obviously, yes. The faster the greens are, the more putts break.
Okay.
But I'm saying an 8-foot putt on a 2% slope versus an 8-foot putt on a 1% slope at Augusta.
Yeah.
2% is really not that much harder. I mean, it is harder, but it's not as much as most people would think.
Yeah.
The speed of the greens is going to be what dictates most of it, which is why Augusta would be harder than most other places, and slope, obviously.
Yeah.
But just so your listeners understand, strokes gained is not intimidating. Just a real quick summary of it is since an 8-foot putt is 50-50, it takes 1.5 strokes to hole out on average. You obviously can't hit the ball 1.5 times. So if I've got an 8-foot putt on number 1 and I make it, I've moved the ball 1.5 strokes closer to the hole in 1 stroke. I basically gained a half a stroke. If on the second hole I've got another 8-foot putt and I 2-putt it, well, I've moved it 1.5 strokes closer to the hole in 2 putts. I've lost a half a stroke, but now I've used 3 putts in 2 holes. So 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, and bam, that's why I'm a dead on 0 strokes gained putter in that scenario. it's not crazy math, but what you've really got to start doing to play the game correctly, I believe, is rather than thinking of I'm 100 yards in the fairway, think I'm 2.8 strokes to hole out. And again, that's a PGA Tour number.
Yes.
But 2.8, like most people think, like, again, especially if you watch TV, they'd be like, oh, these guys are deadly with their wedges. Like, not really. I mean,
Yes.
they're the greatest players in the world. So everything I say about them is obviously tongue in cheek. But at the end of the day, I mean, you make birdie 20% of the time, just don't make stupid bogeys.
Yeah.
That's not mind-boggling, considering they're the greatest players on the planet.
I would definitely say the biggest misconception around what you hear from the recreational golfer is the two things you just said there is proximity to hole with a wedge and putts. I'm just going to throw 8 feet. You know, people say, 10-foot putt, right? I'm going to say 8 foot. If I'll talk with a recreational golfer and they'll say, I missed 4 putts from 8 feet today. I go, how many did you get? And they might say 2. I go, well, geez, you're pretty spot on. Do you know what I mean? Like you may think you missed 4, but overall you've done quite well. And even if you've only had 4 chances from 8 feet and you've missed all 4, you're not as far off as you might actually think that you are. You know what I mean? You're not supposed to get them all by all means, right? And the same thing people would say, I hit too many wedges to like 30 feet. I'm like, yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
Well, that's the key to like when I get so upset about the announcers giving Zalatoris a hard time for his putting. It's like, I get it. I'm not blind. I know it's not pretty. Yeah. I've caddied 100 rounds for the kid in amateur golf. Like, I get it. It ain't pretty. If you think it's not pretty with the putters he's using, you should have seen it with a short putter. But at the end of the day, when they act like he's 170th from 4 feet on tour, it's like, well, that's a pretty good sample group. Like if someone told you that you were 170th, you're one of the worst 4-foot putters on the planet, or excuse me, not on the planet, on the tour, you would think that you would be significantly worse than tour average. Tour average from 4 feet is 92%. Will is 89%. It's like, okay. And so then what you've got to really do the math is from 3 to 5 feet, you have 2.5 of those putts on average per round.
Yep.
And so now if you're 3% worse on something you have 2.5 times around, it's 0.07 shots. Yeah. It's not ideal. Yeah. He would make another couple $100,000 if he was 0.07 shots better, but it's not the end of the world. What is the end of the world is when you miss a 4-footer and you walk to the next tee box and you're all pissed off and you're living in the past. It's funny because I used to think that a lot of like sports psychology stuff was like mumbo jumbo, like you've got to stay present. I didn't really know what that meant, but what staying present means is not getting mad about something that's already happened because by definition, you are not present. You're living in the past. And that's the main thing that I always harped on Will when I was helping him, especially that first year. I mean, he's a smart kid. He picked this all up pretty quick, but that first year he'd miss a short putt and I'd be like, cool. We know we're going to miss some of those. It's 90-ish%. Like you're going to miss a decent amount of them. We have to leave that there and move on, man.
And when you say leave that there, I tell you one thing in my life, right, that I learned through like my meditation practices and, spending a lot of time in India was my wife, we even had a phone call on the way down. I was in the car going to an event and I was expecting the phone call to not go the way that we wanted it to go, right? Because it's a dispute that we've got going on with the company. And I got the phone call and she said, how do you feel? And I say, well, I expected it to happen. So how can I be upset about something that I knew that was going to happen? If so, when you talk about expectations there, if you know that the expectation is what your average is or what you're supposed to do, and you can get that back, or you have already gotten it back, like you said before, you hold the putt first and you miss the next one from 8 feet, then how can you get upset about something that you expect to happen? And then the way you can expect to know
that's it, man.
The expectation is through understanding what you've got there with Decade, right?
The terrible analogy I use on that is if I just walked up and punched you in the face, you could probably be pretty mad at me. But if I told you, like, I'm a little crazy, I'm probably going to punch you in the face once today. And then when I did it, you'd have to be like, wow, he actually did. You couldn't be as mad at me for that as you could if I just popped you out of the blue.
100%.
Again, terrible analogy, but it's kind of the best one I can come up with. Mm-hmm. If you expect something bad to happen, Sam Harris, again, is we've talked about meditation already, but Sam Harris's Waking Up, I think, is just the best for it. But one of the things that I really love that he talks about is like we all treat problems like anomalies. Like, and what he says in this one video, he's like, if you're on a video game, you get to the 12th level of it and just there's nothing, like Super Mario Brothers, you just run straight across for 3 minutes and then you get to the finish, you'd be like, this is the most boring thing ever. And you have to understand that golf, every time you tee it up, even when you shoot your lowest score ever, bad stuff happens. I mean, literally my best round I ever played professionally, the first round I shot 67 or 68 with a double and a triple. I was in the afternoon morning wave. Literally shot 67 or 68 with a double and a triple. I went to dinner that night with my buddies and I was pissed off the entire time. I went back to the hotel room. I did not sleep a single second the entire night. I was so mad and just going through like, dude, you can shoot 59 on this course. I went out, I birdied the first 7 holes. I lipped out on 8 and 9 and birdied 10, 11, and 12. And I'm literally 10 under on 12T after not sleeping. Like, I'm going to do it. And then I parred the last 6 holes to shoot 10 under 62. Nice. Went back to the Outback Steakhouse with my buddies, and I bitched about parring the last 6 holes because I missed it. I missed an easy up and down on a par 5, hit a couple of bad wedges. Yeah. And my buddies just looked at me like, what are you talking about? You just shot 10 under and you're still complaining. And I mean, again, we just all treat these problems like anomalies and that they're just unexpected. And that's where you get yourself in trouble.
Yes. And it's interesting, just treating it for what it is, right? Not for what you kind of wish it was, like just treating it for how it is. But I guess there's a good positive as well, is that I was talking to one of my students who's a professional golfer, and she just came to me a couple months ago, maybe a month ago. And
you said this is one of your friends or one of your clients?
Oh, one of my students, a new student, professional golfer. She plays just here in Australia. And I said to her, she had a really good 9 holes and a really poor 9. She had a really poor 9 holes and a really good 9 holes. I said, how good's that? You had a really good 9 holes. And then she had another round of golf and she had just 2 really poor holes and 16 okay holes. I'm like, how good's that? You had 16 okay holes and 2 poor holes. She goes, Toby, you're always saying that something's okay. And I'm like, because it is. There's huge problems.
You might as well think it's that way, even if it's not. Like, there's a point where we don't want to be kidding ourselves, but there's also a point where it's like, what's the alternative right now? I mean, again, if you go to YouTube, Scott Fawcett, I think that Scott Fawcett might be a decade. You can search Scott Fawcett and you'll find it. Yep. I've got a video in there called Solving Problems. Yep. And it's Sam Harris let me voice over one of his. So he's got these like 6 or 8 minute just essays, just verbal essays in the app. Yep. And I played it once and then I replayed it again and I paused it 5 or 6 times. I'm like, I want you to think of this in a golf context because again, it's one of the reasons I never really did well with the golf psychology books. And going back and reading them all now, I think they're all amazing. Yeah. But at the time, because it was all written like in golf parlance, it just never resonated with me because I'd be out there trying to think of like, which chapter should I be thinking about right now, as opposed to when you get out of the golf genre. So we're into just Sam Harris's stuff. Or honestly, my favorite book ever is Josh Waitzkin, The Art of Learning, which is honestly a chess book.
Yes.
It's not, I shouldn't say it's a chess book because nobody's going to read it at that point. Josh Waitzkin was a chess player who wrote a peak performance book. But the whole thing, it doesn't talk about golf at all, but you can picture the situations like, oh, this is just like that situation on the golf course. Yeah. And again, it's not magic. It's not going to just magically happen. You're going to have to put the work in. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to make some adjustments. But again, one of the funniest things, like the no laying up guys hate me more than anything. And it's funny because I have said a million times, I was the biggest lunatic ever back in the day when I was playing professionally. And they used to always say, like, I talked to this guy that played with Scott back in the day, and he was just a total asshole, idiot, hothead. And I'm like, yeah, I've admitted that. Yes. And I've changed because of the effort and work that I've put into it. So I'm just trying to bring that up because whoever it is that's listening right now, you can make these changes. It's not going to happen by magic. You are going to have to put in some work, but it can be done. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you've just opened up immediately with meditation, which always excites me when we're going to go into a podcast like this because I'm like, we're going to be thinking in the same way. And I hate being in a silo echo chamber, but also at the end of the day, it's a good echo chamber to be in. It's better than some of the other ones we could be in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my experience was I was an extremely hothead as well. And my experience with it, people listen to the podcast have heard this many times before, and I try to kind of inspire people around it, is that I was a bit of a party animal after I played professional golf, and the party just didn't stop, right? I was living in Manly here, which is like, I don't know how to put it into context of where you guys are, but it's like the hub of Sydney, and it's the most beautiful place, and it was just a party. The party never stopped. And
Just like Las Vegas.
Yeah, pretty
without
much.
the gambling.
And I was forced to stop, and then I found my way in India in 2015, and then I went back in 16, and then went back in 18, just before the pandemic. And did many studies. Went to the Dalai Lama's practice up at
Really? Wow.
North Dharamsala. I spent 3 days there, and I go to a temple here as much as I can, which has got Chinese Buddhist temple up here, which is really nice, but it's not Tibetan Buddhism. But yeah, I just do a bit of that. But have you ever heard of Ram Dass?
Ram Dass?
Yeah, Ram Dass. From the Be Here Now network. Yeah, so anything that comes out of the Be Here Now network is pretty much my, I guess, I'm not going to use the term Bible, but that's where I do all, that's kind of like my hub. You know what I mean? It's like my decade.
Yeah, well, there's zero chance I'm ever going to be a religious person.
Yes.
But I've definitely realized as you get older, you can be spiritual without being religious.
Yeah.
It still feels a little hokey to me.
Yeah, no.
But I'm okay with that language at this point. And it's funny because people ask me, like, if you had to choose a religion, which one would it be? And it would be Buddhism for sure. I mean,
100%.
like it's just a bunch of great advice.
Yeah, it's a bunch of great advice, and they would call it. I think they generally would steer away from the word religion as well themselves. It's a way of life. But
this is what I have on my desk. So.
Yeah. I got they're everywhere. Well, especially in my life, you can imagine what I get for birthday presents, right? And Christmas presents is all around Buddhism stuff. But it's interesting though when you talk about. Let's talk about, I can even just off topic, just thinking about it, is that you mentioned there about, religion. And I read something the other day about people who are in religion are genuinely happier because, I'm not religious, right? Because there is direction in their life, right? There's something to believe in. Now, let's talk about decade, right? Genuinely happier. There's something to believe in as well to offer you clarity. And when you have a spiritual practice or religious practice, whatever, there is something you're kind of striving to, helping you answer problems that arise in your life, right? And help you deal with it. Like people think that spiritual people are just happy people. They're not just extremely happy people. They're just better at dealing with problems that come to them, right? And the same thing with like Decade. What Decade offers that you've got with that system there is it offers you an opportunity to not get as far down and to deal with problems, right?
I've got this 13-minute. This is what's funny is I think I'm a pretty objective person, and this will probably be the biggest testament that I can say is I'm a huge Sam Harris fan and I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fan.
Yeah.
And I've been listening to this one 13-minute Jordan Peterson video literally like once a day for a couple months at this point because it's just. Yeah. It's right down those lines. So like I've said a million times, like I'm a better person when I've got something I'm working towards. Like I work out a little better, I eat a little better, I drink a little less, I'm a little more consistent with my meditation, just everything about it, I'm a better person. And in this video, Jordan's talking about like without a goal, there can be no positive emotion because the positive emotion is in putting in the effort towards a goal. And I'd never really thought about it that way. But when there's times, I mean, again, I've done fairly well financially with one company, my electricity company that just sends me residual and now Decade. I really don't have to do anything for it. It'll just keep functioning.
Yes.
But once you don't have that kind of pressure or aspiration, you can get pretty nihilistic really, really quick. And that, again, sounds the most first world problem you can possibly describe. But it is a problem. And so no positive emotion, no goal, no positive emotion. Then what he says from there is without that goal, like you're just kind of, it's just chaos. Yeah. You don't really know what you're doing. And I find myself feeling that way so often, it's unbelievable. So having some sort of a goal that you're working towards is just, in my opinion, mandatory. But then the other thing that he says in that video that's just so brilliant to me, he's like, well, when I'm out on the street and someone will come up to me and they'll just be like, I just want to be happy. He's like, oh, really? That's it? You just want to be happy? Like, good luck with that. I mean, it's just the way he says some things. He's like, what else is there? Like, you just want to walk around happy all the time. That's all it'll take for you to be happy, is to just be happy all the time. I mean, it's just like, wow. I'd never really thought about that, because I've said that a million times, especially about my kids. Man, I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
Again, the way he's like, well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the way it's going to work.
Yeah.
And if that's what your expectations are, and again, I hate walking the line where we talk about like the younger generation and stuff like this, because it is
No, we talk about
social
a lot
media.
on here.
Yeah, I mean, I am a believer that, hey, it's not your fault that you've gotten yourself into this position where you expect everything to be easy. That's not good, and it's not your fault. But also, at the end of the day, man, it's kind of time to toughen up a little bit and realize there's gonna be struggles. If every time anything goes wrong, it's a 5-alarm fire, you're screwed. I mean, it needs to be something that, again, and I can say this because my sister's son was undercut in a basketball game. He had 2 massive concussions. About 18 months later, he wound up killing his mom, my sister, his brother, himself. So I have a double murder-suicide in my direct family. Not ideal. But also, well, the world's not going to stop so you can deal with this. I mean, again, there's bad stuff is coming to every single person listening to this. If it hasn't hit you yet, it's coming.
Yes.
I mean, it's coming. So you need to be prepared for it. And that's what the meditation stuff is so much about. So you can start recognizing, again, where I screwed up when I was younger, when I tried it, I used to try to have no thoughts. I'd get frustrated when I couldn't stop the monkey mind. And it's not about having no thoughts. It's about recognizing the ruminating thoughts before they spiral out of control. It's about, wow, that's not a very useful or productive thought. I should probably I should stop thinking about it. And if you can't do that, then that's when you actually try to actively do a meditation wherever you're at. Take a few seconds, try to click in, give yourself a little space. Again, because it's one of the most cliche sayings of meditation, is just giving a little space between stimulus and response.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
the amount of trouble you can save yourself with that. I mean, again, most people know I got into an argument with Brad Faxon and Dan Hicks when Will was winning his first FedEx Cup event. And I was just joking when I told Dan Hicks to go screw himself. I literally even said, yes, this is a joke in it. But then when Faxon retweeted it, I just triggered immediately. Like, I just took my brain and threw it out the window for a second, because I'm like, well, I don't need this thing right now. Screw this guy. I'm going to show him he can't do that. If I had had maybe 5 more seconds to just, hey, is this really a good idea? And, it definitely wasn't optimal, to say the least. But, that's looking back on it. I needed a little more space there.
And also in what you're saying there, and what I hear, when people talk about, when Scott mentioned the monkey mind there, and the mind jumping around, and, about the thoughts and meditation, how I like to wrap all that up is that I think people need to get an understanding of, it's okay to have a shitty thought or an intrusive thought, or think about something that you might think, fuck, I shouldn't be thinking about that. That's really not good. You know what I mean? But what's really important...
It has to be okay to think that, to have that thought, because they're going to come.
They're going to come. Yes.
Carry on.
So you don't want to, in my experience, when I talk to people about this, is push it down. It's to sit with it, understand it, acknowledge it, and then try to move on from it. And basically, what meditation practice has given me is 2 seconds before I open my mouth, right? That's what I give it. But what you're saying there was, it was okay to have the absolute shits that Faxon reposted whatever you posted, right? And you lose your top. Of course it's okay to do that, right? But you just didn't get that 2 to 5 seconds that you needed before you reacted.
Just a quick analyzation. Since then, I mean, literally today on Facebook, I wish I could remember what it was. Someone had posted something that was just so categorically stupid. And I had typed out this thing and I was like, is this going to do anything positive for me over the next 4 hours of my life?
Yeah.
Do you have the bandwidth right now to deal with what's going to come back from this? I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
Like, and what's the point then? I mean, again, there's no point.
I would.
Arguing on social media is the single dumbest thing you can possibly do. And considering I did it professionally on Twitter for a few years is just insane.
I don't have Twitter, but seen you post stuff on Instagram and you say stuff like I've quit Twitter or whatever. But when you talk about talking, before we get back into decades,
Well, Instagram's a better platform for me, and it's a better platform just for everyone.
Yeah.
Because it's just not quite as cynical, but it's the medium is not like quite as conversational as Twitter.
Yeah.
In Twitter, it's way more like you're texting with your friends.
Yeah,
And
okay.
in Instagram, again, it can't skew that much from the general population as far as who you're the demographic. They got to be more similar than people think. It's just the way the platform operates. It's not quite as conversational. And most importantly for me is when a dumb comment comes in, I can just delete it.
Yeah.
And I just personally, I couldn't handle letting that bad comment just live in my thread.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had to answer every single question. So it wasn't like, haha, you can't answer that one. Like and that's on me. But you got to be really careful with social media, man.
One thing I will add, and what you mentioned there about, and if you're a person who does post nasty stuff, and to Scott's or my accounts, right, or things, the reason why I don't reply to you is because I don't want to keep thinking about what your reply is back to me. So I don't want to be sitting there doing my work or my online lessons or coaching someone who's paid good money to be with me. I don't want to be thinking about, what did that mother write back to me? What did he write back? You know, I just don't. That's the reason why I don't write back and put you in your place. It's because I don't want to have to live in my head, essentially.
Well, and that's again what Sam talks about a lot with meditation is we all get in these arguments and then we run them through our head for days. Sometimes there's like, I should have said this or I should have said that, or you're imagining an upcoming argument like I got something on my mind and when she says that I'm going to say this, and you're just literally running these iterations in your head that it's like it probably won't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not the way it's going to go at all.
Yeah.
And you can't change the past. Again, that gets always back to present. If you're considering what an upcoming argument might be, you're living in the future. If you're thinking, God, I should have hit him with this zinger, then you're living in the past. Like, just none of it matters.
Yeah, I know. Anyways, let's get back to it. I could talk about that stuff all day, right? It's my life. That's
I
my passion.
I hope the listeners at home realize this is not direct golf talk, but this is golf talk. I mean, when you're thinking about a bogey you just made, or you've got I've got a birdie hole coming up, like that. This is all important for golf. But yes, let's hit the Tiger 5 or whatever you want to go to.
I actually wanted to. I'm going to kind of branch off that a little bit to a question I had.
Wherever you want to go.
Do you know my friend Stephen Giuliano? Do you know Stephen Giuliano, SGG golf coaching in Singapore? He coaches.
No, well, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know a lot of people, right? But
yeah.
He actually wanted to ask. He went to one of your seminars, right? Somewhere. He said a long time ago.
Not in Singapore.
No, well, he's in Malaysia now. Might have been. I can't remember. He told me somewhere. He actually corrected himself and told me. Anyways, he's listening to this.
I feel like it might have been in Houston. I feel like I had a guy that possibly in Houston, but carry on.
Anyways, he's listening to this right now. He's probably thinking, Toby, it's this. Anyways, he wanted to talk to me.
For those listening at home, I've met 2,000 people in the last 3 years.
Of course. No, of course. He
really hard.
He wouldn't give a shit. He wanted to ask you a question about the evolution of the system. He noticed it was more... I kind of paraphrased it and I should have written it down, but I should have wrote it down exactly what he said. But he told me that the system from when he earlier first looked at it has now moved more... I'm going to use the term psychological that he used.
100%.
He wanted to understand the evolution of it. You want to talk about the growth of it?
Yeah, so 2014 was when I caddied for Zalatoris. Again, I literally created all this just for my own game, and then because I had an injury the week before the Texas Sam, it's the only reason I went and caddied for Will instead of playing myself.
Okay.
And so as I caddied for him, I'm like, my God, this is so simple. He's just destroying this field. Same thing at the U.S. Junior. Go to the U.S. Amateur, and my buddy, who was the SMU coach at the time, I've known since junior golf, he came up to me. He's like, I think he's like, I can tell you're doing something with Will. I had this laminated sheet of paper. I mean, literally just like a laminated sheet of paper where I was doing kind of this math in my head. Yeah. And he's like, I don't know what you're doing, but DeChambeau fires at every pin and I can't get him to stop. Is there any way you could like organize this into, and again, this is where like I come across as super cocky. I get it. But like none of the actual business has been my idea. He's the one that said, if you can put this into some sort of a seminar, you can teach this at scale.
Yeah.
And the reason he said a seminar was for me to do it at SMU, we had to do it indoors. So I wouldn't be considered a third paid coach, which is illegal by the NCAA.
Okay.
That's the only reason that I made a seminar.
Yeah.
So to your friend's question, it initially was just like shot patterns, approach shot strategy, tee shot strategy, putting, and then like 30 minutes of mental stuff at the end.
Yeah.
And I did that version 15 times at places like Duke, Oklahoma State, Wake Forest, like all Florida, USC, Cal, Stanford, UCLA, like the biggest programs brought me in to do these seminars. And as I was doing it, there were so many little, it's like a comedy show. It feels like the guy's just up there riffing, ad-libbing, but obviously it's all basically memorized. That's how it was, but there would be times when I was like in the shot pattern thing, and something I normally said in the mental part, I would say it up here. And so I slowly, throughout doing this now another 50 times, realized, well, I've said everything I wanted to say about the mental section. Like by the time I got to it, I'm like, we're kind of done here. And that was the evolution of realizing I can teach you the math of Decade, the strategy system, in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's the mental portions that allow you to commit to it and understand why you're doing it. Again, it's just the why is everything.
Yeah.
And so he's dead on accurate that it shifted to where I used to end with the mental stuff, and now I open with the mental stuff. And even if you buy the Decade app, the table of contents is introduction, mental, approach. Like that's the first thing I'm working on. Is the introduction is just shot patterns, the art of scoring, what actually makes your scoring average go lower, which is again technically all mental stuff. Like we need to understand this side of it.
Yes.
And then it's about 30 or 45 minutes of mental content. And then we get into the actual strategy. And so much so that even if you're a Foundations member, where it's all the same content. I just, instead of having 5 hours of tutorial content that you get day one of when you buy Elite, I just break it up into 6 equal segments to send it to you over 6 months to force players to slow down and really think about the ideas before moving on.
Yeah, I get you.
You don't even start getting into strategy until like month 3 now.
Yeah.
Because I want to lay down the background of the mental side. Because again, as a hopefully reformed lunatic, that's everything. And again, I'm not going to rag on Faxon too much, but when you get a guy like that who he made it, he never struggled. He was on, I don't think he ever lost his card. I mean, he's one of the best players of all time.
I think so.
Never won a major, but kidding. He's one of the best golfers in the history of the game. But as a result, he didn't really struggle. He never had a point where he had to go back and analyze, what did I do wrong? And a lot of the Decade stuff is like, man, I traveled with Chad Campbell and Chris Riley, played a lot of practice rounds with those dudes, and in every single one of them, 2 future Ryder Cuppers, I was like, I feel like I'm as good as these guys. Again, I won, but not as wasn't doing what they did. And at the end of the day, I think they just got it more than I did. They just understood the game, and that's experience. But that's the other quote too that Stuart Sink said this year in Hawaii. They asked him about all these young guns and how are they playing so great without the experience, and his answer was, he's like, you don't need experience anymore. At this point, you can just buy experience. It's just for sale for $325. Like, you don't need 20 years of experience to figure out all this stuff. And he's like, I'm not mad about it. I use all the tools too. I use ShotLink. I use analytics. I use data. I use it too. But it sure would have been nice to have that at 19 and not at 47. I mean, he literally, after he won the British Open, he didn't win for 12 years. And I always remember watching him because we're the exact same age. And so I was always like, man, this guy's amazing. But winning is so hard on tour, it's ridiculous. Like, a great win rate is 2 or 3% is off the charts. That's a win like every 18 months. But if you're good enough to never lose your card and win a major, and then you don't win for 12 years, like, it's kind of weird. And once he bought the app and won the following week, and then won again 6 months later. And it's just like,
he went
for
hard.
him, his caddy, I won't mention him by name, but he's definitely an arguer on Twitter. And I've offered to help him before even Stewart fired him. I offered to help him. Like, he was so confrontational with me on Twitter. And I was just like, dude, let's hop on a webinar. I'll just show you what it is I do before you like bash it.
Interesting.
And literally Stewart fired him, had his son caddy the next week and play him like a video game, and he won.
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry, man, I tried to help you, but sometimes you just gotta, there's no reason to, it'd be like someone intentionally playing blackjack, intentionally not knowing the rules.
Yeah.
Like just, I'm going to hit whenever I want to. I'm going to hit by feel. I'm going to hold by feel. Like, that's not how it works. There is a system. You're still going to lose, but there is a system you can play that makes it much better than what you're doing on your own.
Yeah, narrow-mindedness is a very bad trait, isn't it? You know, like when people are just, even if you don't believe in something, I think it's important that if someone's offered you the opportunity to still listen to them. You know what I mean? And they might convince you, or you might learn something from them, or you can at least have a discussion about it. But being a bit narrow-minded like that, it's interesting because you're talking about his caddy. I'm like going, God, I hope you're not shit-canning his son here, because he's at the start of the conversation. Because I know that his son have had some good success, and it's kind of you've kind of painted a little bit more of a clearer picture there for us. All right.
Well, it's like Steve Williams to bring up an Aussie.
Yes.
Like, it's not a mystery. Like, the dude's the best caddy in the history of the game. Ted Scott's going to probably give him a run for his money, but that has as much to do with his horse that Steve's does. But it's like, that dude understands the game and how to play and how to manage your way around a course as good as any player ever has. I mean, he doesn't have the physical skills, but he certainly has the rest of it.
Yeah, and he's clearly got a really good understanding too of it's one thing having the information, but also the implementation of delivering that information at the right time, how to deliver it, how to read your player. Like, having information is fantastic, but talking to a player in that moment is a huge skill.
I think one of the most, people can talk about all these amazing shots and amazing this and everything. I think the most amazing thing in the history of golf, and I literally mean this. Yeah. There was that one shot, I think it was in the British Open, where Tiger is over it. He's about to pull the trigger, and Steve calls him off. He's like, wait a second. That's not the right club, because they'd kind of debated, I think it was back between like 4 and 5 iron.
Yeah.
You got Tiger Woods over, like, because I've been in that position with Zalatoris, like in the U.S. Junior, where it's like, I really want this guy to win, and I'm just watching him. I'm like, God, this isn't the right club. Buddy, back off. Let's go through this again, and getting him to change a club, because now it's on you, dude.
Oh, yeah.
If this is wrong, it's on you. And to do that to Tiger in a major as he's over the ball, about to pull the trigger, and be like, this isn't right, and change the club and be correct. I got goosebumps. That takes some balls.
I got goosebumps even saying that, and takes brass balls, takes a lot of trust in the relationship. But when you talk about Steve Williams is the one that gave Scotty the read when he won Masters in 2013. He gave Scotty told him, Adam Scott said, this is my line. And Steve said, no, it's not. It's here. And that's why when he kind of holds it, I'm not sure why, but it's obviously highly emotional. But, you know, he's kind of looking at Steve, and Steve's happy, and there's this kind of situation where, you're right, buddy. You know what I mean? Kind of like that.
And there's just things that sometimes you can't quite explain as a person with experience. I talk about this one thing all the time, this one putt that Will had in the Texas AM. It was in the final round. It was an important putt. It was like an 8-foot par putt.
Yeah.
And, you know, my eyes, I was 40 at the time. They're starting to get a little bit weak. And he's like, I got this thing just outside the left, because I always let him read it first, and then I could just kind of tell from the general slope and everything. And then I'd come in, and if I didn't like it, and he's like, the pin was on the right side of the green. It was like 4 from the right, and there's a bunker over there. And he's like, I got this thing just outside the left, and I'm like, hold on, there's no chance. I read it. I'm like, I see what you're seeing, but I think it's everything long that's giving you a little bit of a distortion. He's like, it's got to be outside the left. I'm like, it's not. I guarantee you it's not. He's like, how do you know that? I'm like, because there's a bunker right there. The water cannot drain into the bunker. Yeah. So there's just no chance this putt goes materially left. It might be inside left, but it's from with as close as this thing is to the bunker, it's just not on a 1% slope. I see what you're seeing, but trust me on this one. Yeah. And he put it inside left, and it didn't move an inch. Like, it still kind of caught the left lip and went in the hole. And he was just like, I would never make that putt by myself. Just like, I didn't even like, I never would have thought of that until like in that situation. And it's just like, yeah, the water's just the water. They have to get the water off the green, and there's no chance it's going into that bunker.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. A bit like Wyndham Clark, mate. Poor bugger.
What's that?
Wyndham Clark's lip out on last week.
Oh my God. He just hit that putt too hard.
He did.
I mean, that putt just had too much speed. And I guarantee, I would like to know, and I'll ask him if I ever see him, I'll ask him, did you not want to leave that putt short?
Yeah, of course.
Because that's just part of the range of outcomes from that distance. You have to be comfortable leaving some short. Otherwise, you're hitting them too hard.
Because well, when you look at we're talking about the 72nd hole here at the Play Championship, Wyndham Clark had that dirty lip out, people listening. But what you'll actually notice there too, and you'll even see Brian Harmon's ball, every ball that kind of goes past the hole from that direction goes an extra foot or two than what you'd probably expect. You know what I mean? Like you always, like when you saw Brian Harmon's putt come back, he definitely had like about a 5.5 to 6 footer coming back, and Wyndham Clark's was on that same trajectory, and that brings the hole, that narrows the hole size down so much at that speed, right?
Yeah.
All right, so
yeah, I mean,
can you tell me? We speak about the system, right? Can you give me in a nutshell what, before we move into some questions, what the system is in Decade? Is there any way that you can kind of explain it to us in a nutshell?
I mean, essentially, so the traditional playing lesson advice is going to say like, okay, this is a green light spot. Let's aim at the flag. Oh, this is a little bit more difficult here. Let's go towards the middle of the green. And the key to that is golf is the only sport in the world that's not played on a uniform field of competition. Mm-hmm. So every soccer field's the same. I assume every rugby field's the same. Yeah. What do I know?
Pretty much.
I've never played rugby, cricket, all of them. I assume they're all the same. But golf is the only sport that's you could have anything. I mean, it could literally be anything. So I try to use some iconic holes. Number 10 at Pebble Beach is 500 yards long from the U.S. Open tee box. The green is 17 yards wide, and there's an ocean on the right. Number 18 at St. Andrews is 354 yards long, and the green is 52 yards wide. So middle of the green in both of those situations is just different information. And so you really have to start taking the length of the shot in combination with the surrounding hazards, and then start making a decision on where to aim. So let's say that we've got just a pretty average width green, especially here in the States. I don't know about Australia.
Yeah.
A pretty average width green is about 24 yards wide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if we've got a sand wedge and the pin is 5 yards from the left edge, 100 yards, we're probably going to be aiming for them, unless there's a water left, we're probably aiming right at that flag. But now let's back it up to we're 160 yards and we have an 8-iron, same situation, pins 5 from the left yards. We need to start moving it towards the middle of the green. Mm-hmm. But we don't need to go all the way to the middle of the green in that scenario, just towards it. So again, there's that inflection point.
Yep.
But now if the green was 52 yards wide, we're not even close to the middle of the green. Yeah. So Decade is really about helping you choose. It's a simple process of, Decade is just an acronym. D distance, how long is the shot? That's the first input that we need to consider. This is a bit of a placeholder to make the acronym work, but the first E is expectation, which I think, again, in hindsight, it is the first step. Yeah. Let's have some proper expectations of what's a good outcome here. Yeah. C is correct target. Now, because of the length of the shot, we're going to figure out how far we need to be aiming from the edge of the green. Mm-hmm. So that's where we start is wherever the pin is located, we're going to start choosing our target from that edge of the green. And then A analyze is analyzing the surrounding hazards, the weather conditions, how firm the course is. And then from those inputs, we're going to choose the proper target relative to where the hole is. Which again starts becoming regardless of how wide the green is. Again, I don't disagree quite often. When we're out there with a 6-iron or longer, the middle of the green on an average green is going to be about correct.
Yeah.
But par is a hell of a score for most amateurs, par is a hell of a score from anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I had alluded to earlier with the Tiger 5 is Tiger had these 5 things he tracked, and one of them was bogey with 9-iron or less. Yeah. And so I turned that into bogey inside 150 because I think that back in the day, that's probably about what his 9-iron was before these lofts started getting out of control. Yeah. And what's just crazy is that everybody on tour, literally, they make bogey 15-ish% of the time from inside 150. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just, you can't make enough birdies to offset even the occasional bogey. The birdies are just so precious
Yeah.
that you've got to protect those and not make dumb bogeys.
Yeah, I used to call them, even before Tiger came out with that, I used to call them wedge bogeys. Like I'd be in the car getting the shits, wedge bogeys. But can we just elaborate a little bit more there? When you spoke about that number, right? Let's call it, you said 160 yards, pin 5 yards off the left. When we're dissecting or analyzing this shot, well, dissecting would be after a post, right? But I see a lot of stuff out there from Athletic Motion talking about making sure that you try and hit the shot that is as standard as possible. So if that 160 yard, right, you're saying there that it's the perfect 8-iron, right? Let's say it's a perfect 8-iron, 160. What if it's halfway between clubs? How much do you vary? Does it widen your dispersion?
I think you're amateur at home. I mean, I hate saying this because like a 5 handicap is a great player.
Yeah, of course.
But your 5 and certainly 10 and higher handicap, they don't need to do that really ever. Yeah. The variance, their shot pattern is so deep. So we've got a shot pattern width and we've got a shot pattern depth.
Yep.
Their shot pattern is so deep, like it's gonna randomly be the right club sometimes. It's gonna randomly not be the right club sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Once you start getting down below a 5, you're starting to get enough skill that you could probably have a full shot and I would say half off, but like half between the next club shot.
Yeah.
Stuart Sink, tour player. I've got videos in the app of him in the 18th fairway at Harbortown, and he and his son are trying to decide, is it a 5 off or a 10 off? So basically, Stuart's going to go full shot, 5 off, 10 off, next club. Full shot, 5 off, 10 off, next club. Full shot, 5. Because especially on tour, again, without getting into trigonometry and geometry, but like if you're in the left side of the fairway and you're using a pin sheet and sprinkler heads, the sprinkler head is to the front of the green, and then the pin sheet goes directly up the green.
Yeah.
And so if you're on the left side of the fairway and the pin's on the left, as the crow flies, you're closer to the hole for sure than it would tell you otherwise.
Yeah, great.
And the opposite is true if you're on the left side and the pin's on the right, you're further from the hole than your distance tells you. Now, when you start, for the amateurs at home, kicking in, okay, well, I've got a laser. I know exactly how far I am. Okay, cool. The subtle variances in wind change how far the ball is going to go. Like, we're just trying to be, I do believe we're trying to be a little too precise in this game. Yeah. And it's funny, we actually had a friend we used to play professional golf with that we were sitting there BSing at dinner one night, and my buddy noticed, he's like, every shot you ever tell us you were 100 or 105 or 110 or 115 or 120, like you're never 112. He's like, I just rounded to the closest 5. And my buddy Robbie was like, you don't try to hit it 102 if you're 102. He's like, you seriously think you can hit it 102? And he's like, well, I'm trying to, but it's like in hindsight, like, yeah, good luck with that. I mean, you just don't have that much control. So I do believe if we've got a half club and the pin's on the front, go with the longer one and just hit it.
Yeah.
If we've got we got a half, like a not perfect yardage and the pin's in the middle, go with the longer one and maybe take a little bit off. And if you've got a half club in the back, probably go with the shorter one and hit it full. I mean, again, I hate making generic statements about a specific example.
I understand.
But that advice is probably not going to screw anyone up.
Well, majority of golfers come up short, right? So it's not really.
Majority of tour players come up short.
Yes.
It's not.
Really,
I mean, the numbers. Again, this is where, back to arguing on Twitter, there was a golf announcer that was probably named Brandel that was talking about the best play, like the DJ and Jack Nicklaus had this advantage because of their fade, they were coming up below the hole more often than your normal tour player, and they were coming up below it and right. Like the fade was coming in short right of the hole, so they had these uphill right to lefters all day. And I'm like, yeah, and they also would have tacked on 15 feet to their proximity. Like implicit in that statement is that Jack and DJ mishit it more often than the average guy. The best, again, I hate making this is way too concrete of a statement, but the best strokes gained approach players get the most shots past the hole in regulation. So like Tiger and DJ average 42 or 43% overall getting, and I should say we're controlling out the fact they just hit it further. So on par fives, I'm saying from like 100 to 200 in the fairway, the best iron players get the most balls past the hole. Now, part of that is they hit it the most solid, obviously, but also I think they just understand their distances much better, because if you think about taking this shot pattern now that's like an oval shape, and if I center it the exact same size shot pattern, and I don't know if you use video or not in your podcast, but like, imagine we've got an oval, and only 30% of it is past the middle of or past the pin, or 40% of it is. My proximity is going to lower with the exact same size shot pattern just by centering it better over the hole. And people all the time will be like, yeah, but you're going to have a bunch of downhill slick comeback putts then. Like, well, that's better than having a putt twice as long from short of the hole or being in a front bunker. Like, it's just, it's literally not even debatable either.
Do you know one thing I would consider about that, Scott, though? I've thought about this, right, how majority of golfers do come up short. I always said every golfer, in the world does. I think there's also a little bit of the fear of what you can't see and unknown psychologically, inside of you, where when you're looking at your intended target, majority of the time we're hitting uphill, right? Like we're looking at a green circumference that's up. We can't see past the flag that well because it's generally a little bit of a drop off or whatnot. I think, and even if you think about hitting a shot, if you're on a golf course and you're not 100% familiar with it or whatnot, or even if you are familiar with it and you see it go over the green, there's also a bit of I hope that's okay. I hope that's all right. But if you're short, you know where it is. It's just how I can see it. Everything's okay. I can go up there and chip it on. Do you know what I mean? I think there's a little bit of a psychological issue about that as well.
There was definitely a cliche back in the day, I assume it's dead at this point, for tour players, was you can't keep your card from long. Because everyone thought that if you're going long, you're chipping back down the hill, you're putting down the hill, and just all this stuff. And it's like, okay, maybe, but nobody goes long too often. I mean, literally nobody goes long too often. So it's like, it's an irrelevant statement. I get it. It's probably better to not be long too often. But this is where people get themselves in trouble, is they let one potential negative outcome drive the entire decision. You can't remove all trouble. There's something bad's going to be in play. And this is actually Adam Schenk, when he finished second last year. There was I think it was on 9 and 10 in the final round. On 9, he made like maybe a bad bogey with wedge. I wish I remember these details exactly, but he made like a bad bogey. And then the next hole, the pin was on the front right with a bunker short right, and he smoked it way long left and made bogey. And we talked after the round, and he was like, I was just didn't want to hit in that front bunker. I'm like, well, you accomplished that. You had a 25-foot chip shot coming back. Like, you can't that's in play. That front bunker has to be in play if you have the correct target. Shot patterns are too big to remove all of the trouble. It's just not the way it works. Shot patterns are so much bigger than most people would recognize. And I posted a bunch of stuff this weekend from ShotLink on this idea. I took it all down because I don't want to post too much ShotLink stuff and make the tour mad. But shot patterns just blow your mind how big they are.
People listening, shot pattern, I think you could use the term like heat map as well, would you say? Like where the balls are finishing, right? It's not as tight as what 100%. People think they are. It's definitely not as tight.
Well, and this is where the PGA Tour, and television, I should say more than the PGA Tour, does everyone a disservice by... They'll say, like on this par 3, average proximity is 32 feet. And then they just throw this 32-foot circle exactly over the hole. So it's like any shot inside of this it's like, no, that's going to be skewed towards the middle of the green. Because they're not just hitting a third of their shots in the water. So like using the average proximity, you've got to understand what you're looking at in order to say, like, the average proximity, like a shot 42 feet left might be fantastic, and it falls within the shot pattern of that 32-foot proximity.
I think, yes, I completely agree. You painted it beautifully. And I think one of the other disservices that they do is that when a tour player hits a wedge shot to 20 feet and they go, oh, he's going to be disappointed with that, or that's a poor shot. It's like, well, it's actually not too bad. You know what I mean? In some circumstances, I see them.
Good on average.
It's actually not too bad at all. But actually, I saw something on Instagram last night. when I was doing my secret investigating. That's on your public forum, secret investigating. You put on there about there's a really cool video with Frederick from what's he got? Frederick
Lindholm.
Yeah, that's it. He's got some training aid. You showed him an example of a ball in the rough from 98 yards, or just call it 100 yards versus the ball.
Yeah.
Can you just run me through that statistic that I watched?
Well, the rough is, again, it's about a quarter of a shot penalty on tour on average. So 100 yards in the fairway is 2.8 strokes. 100 yards in the rough is 3.02 strokes.
Yeah.
And that number is pretty consistent. From 160, it's exactly that. 160 is 2.98 in the fairway, and it's 3.23 in the rough.
Yeah.
So I get it that it seems like, oh, the rough's not long enough or whatever. Like, the rough is a penalty. And so, again, you've got to consider the entire shot pattern is going to contain some shots in the rough and contain some shots in the fairway. And this is why, if there's any one thing that I definitely feel like I've accomplished with changing strategy overall, is when you see all these kids hitting driver just everywhere, and the announcer's like, these kids play so aggressive these days. And then you got the older people saying, I hate bomb and gouge. It's like, you can hate it all you want. It's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what that video, if I remember it correctly, we did that one 2 years ago. But it's just like hitting driver everywhere, because back to Zalatoris, there was this one hole that he was planning on hitting like 4-iron sand wedge on. He's like, I'll just put this 4-iron out there in the fairway and I'll have 110. I'm like, fair enough. First of all, you're not going to hit the fairway every time with a 4-iron, which is hard for people to believe, but that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And with driver, you're not going to miss it every time. And where the math gets skewed is, even if you only hit the fairway 30% of the time up there with driver, those are some real scoring opportunities. But then your expected score from 60 or 70 yards closer with a driver versus your long iron, you could put it in the rough 100% of the time with driver, and in the fairway 100% of the time with your long iron, and you would still be better off with driver.
Yeah.
And that's just where, again, people overthink it, especially with like, I'll just drop back to 3-wood here and get it in play. Like, you don't hit your 3-wood any straighter than your driver. And because I guarantee you somebody's listening at home right now, like I do, like, okay, well, your driver's not fit for you very well then.
Yeah.
It's not because you're amazing with your 3-wood, it's because your driver sucks. I just cost you $600 for listening to this podcast because you need a driver fitting.
I love that you said that, because I was talking to one of my students once, and I'm so glad you said that, about, you know, his fairway finder with his 3-wood or whatnot. And I was going, man, if you want to hit a fairway, there's no point hitting 3-wood over driver. And
well, that's
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was like, there's no point hitting 3-wood over driver. If you want to get something, let's look at maybe more of like your 2-iron or something that you want to maybe muscle, like your 3-iron down there. Let's look at that as a fairway finder, you know, potentially building a shot for this guy. He's a 130-mile driver, right? Very, very, very fast. I said, your 3-wood, there's no...
90% of the time that 3-wood is a better option than driver, it's because it stays short of a crossing hazard. That's it. That's the vast majority of the reason. But this goes back to DeChambeau. What's funny about him is, so Zalatoris was 2014, DeChambeau was 2015. He wins the NCAA Amateur 2 months after sitting through my seminar. And we're sitting there in the middle of the summer. So before he wins the U.S. Amateur, we're sitting there. I went up to Caddie for Zalatoris at the Pat Coast Am in Eugene, Oregon, and we played with Maverick McNeely, DeChambeau, and Will in the practice round. And Bryson just hits his little fairway finder off like the first 5 holes. And I knew he had the big ball and the fairway finder. And so after like 4 or 5 holes, I'm like, let me see the big ball, dude. I just want to see it. Like, this golf course, we may not even get to see it at all. He tees this thing up like an inch higher and just puts an extra 15 miles an hour of ball speed on it. Like, it was truly incredible that he just threw this on it. And I was like, what are we doing here, buddy?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I'm just afraid that I'm going to hurt myself if I do that very much. I'm like, well, I would get over that. And it would be so amazing to go back to this 21-year-old kid who's afraid of hitting his big ball driver a couple times around and be like, you're going to finish second in the World Long Drive contest in 5 years. Like, it's the craziest shit ever. I mean, I mean that.
Yeah.
And my people have officially showed up to take our pictures.
Yeah.
But You got anything you want to finish it up with? I've never
No.
had to say that before, but I can hear them vacuuming downstairs.
Oh man, I can hear it too. It's okay, mate. It's okay. I've actually got a big day on myself. But I actually wanted to add you a little question on that, and I'll put the links below if people want to get Decade, right, and kind of find out what you are, your Instagram page. If anyone wants to kind of reach out to you, I guess that's the place to probably get you through there or through the Decade website. But has Bryson had an influence in Decade at all since you got him on board? Because I know he's an extremely wise man, well, smart.
No,
smart guy.
People ask me all the time that's where I thought you were going to go earlier when you said it's changed from the guy in Singapore. And I'm like, it hasn't changed at all. Oh, you're talking about the structure and the timing of it. Yeah, the math is never going to change.
Yeah.
It could theoretically change a little bit as players get more committed to their targets and shot patterns become smaller because of it. Because I do believe like there's holes on the PGA Tour, especially on par threes, where it's like I, as a 50-year-old amateur, can create a better shot pattern than what you guys just did on this 200-yard par three, which is not possible. That just shows to me a lot of non-commitment and confusion to shots. So I do expect to see that keep tightening, which might change the math by a yard, maybe two. But no, I mean, again, Bryson, just zero in. But this is what was cool.
I just thought that off the cuff then when you're talking about him.
No, 100%. But what was cool with Bryson is that semester. So I taught them all of this in February of 2015 to him, and we did. What's crazy is we did a seminar at SMU for the whole team, and there wound up being 4 USGA champions in the room that eventually won, and 3 of them played on tour.
Yeah, crazy.
But the deal with Bryson and Coach Enloe. Coach N was like, dude, he was ranked like 67th in the world at the time, and he'd always been beating on him. Like, you play like an idiot. So he literally walked how these college coaches, they usually switch off who they walk with. Enloe walked every single hole with him that spring semester and just played him like a video game, just like I did with Zalatoris.
Wow.
And again, luckily he had success early. I say this all the time. Like, if I give a seminar to 50 players, I'd be like, by definition, like a third of you are going to play well tomorrow, a third are going to play average, and a third are going to play bad. Like, I feel sorry for the third that play bad because you're going to think, well, this wasn't for me.
Yes.
And the third that play good, I'm going to be like, yay for you because you're all in.
Yeah.
Bryson played well his first tournament, and he's like, this is interesting. Played well again. This is interesting. Wins the NCAA championships is like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Same thing with Zalatoris. If he had just happened to play bad at the Texas AM, even I'd probably been like, whatever.
Yeah.
But he wins, and he hadn't even won an AJGA, and the guy goes and wins the Texas AM.
Yeah.
It's getting a little bit of success early is hugely important, unfortunately, to being able to commit and stick to the process.
Yes. And I think he's got a good brain for it too, right? Like to convince as well.
Sure.
Bryson would have a good mind. Hey, but I'll let you go.
Well, I say this all the time. When he won the USAM, I was actually at a movie with my wife, and my phone just starts lighting up. I'm like, well, I guess Bryson won. And she said to me, she's like, that's got to be good for business, right? I'm like, I mean, maybe. I could also see where it's negative. People are like, well, yeah, he's smart, he gets it.
Oh,
and I'm always like, when people ask me like, well, do you have to be smart to do it? I'm like, no, but it sure doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just like, it's just another. It'd be like, is being a fast sprinter important in sprinting? Like, to be one of the best players of all time, you're not going to be an idiot. I mean, one of the things about DJ, the guy's actually really smart. I mean, this is what's funny is like Patrick Reed literally says, he's one of the smartest people I know. He doesn't sound real smart when he talks, but he's a savant at the game. I mean, he is as smart of a golfer as you're going to get.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like when I mean that, doesn't mean that Bryson I know that he was smart, that he got Decade, but I was saying that he's got a brain that would understand that,
sure.
math here. Like he's taking out the word feel essentially and putting it.
Well, it's like Fitzpatrick. I mean, guy's super smart. He dug in. I mean, he was such a fan of it. He paid me to work with his brother Alex when he was in college. Yeah. I mean, it never hurts, but I don't want that to intimidate people because the math of Decade is literally no harder than 2 + 2. Oh, yeah. You might have to sit at home and think about it for a little bit. But again, my canned joke that I'll end it with is if you think you should have shot lower every time you teed it up, you either made mental or strategic mistakes or you're not as good as you think you are. Like it can literally be nothing else. And so if it is the former, the latter, I don't know which one it is. If it is the fact that you make mental and street mistakes, what I would always say to you is, what's your plan for stopping that?
Yeah.
My plan, and I definitely have not realized this until recently, like within the last year, just kind of doing some soul searching and thinking. I always think that I thought I'm just going to have to get better in order to stop making the bogeys with the wedges, the shit that I would talk about with my buddies at dinner that like, oh, you won't believe what I did on 6. In order to stop that, I needed to get better at the game. I didn't need to get better at the game. I needed to make better decisions. And that's what Chad Campbell and Chris Riley wore me out with. So again, to upsell as hard as possible, like if you think you should have shot lower, you don't have to buy Decade, but you do need to tell me what's your plan to stop doing that. Now you can spend a decade trying to figure that out. It's literally why I use the word decade, or you can join the membership. And again, it's funny. Like literally 100% of our players, our members improve. We can track the scoring averages.
Yes.
It's literally bonkers. They all improve.
I think to even end on all of that, my friend Richard, he said to me a long time ago, Richard Woodhouse, and he said, golf is the most poorly trained sport in the world, right? And not only are we the most poorly trained sport in the world, we're also, when you look at strategies around other professional sports and how they're approaching each play and defensive and attacking coaches, and in golf, we've just got a technical swing coach. That's it.
It is the most poorly trained sport in the world, but also similar to how I say it's the only sport in the world that's not played on a uniform field of competition.
Yeah.
It's the only sport that's not taught on the field of competition.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that's a problem. Yeah. And like I used to get junior golfers' parents that would get mad at me, like my son's coach isn't getting on the course with my player. Like, well, did you give him $600?
Yeah.
Well, that's ridiculous. I agree. Like for the price of course management lessons is way too high. They need to be taking 3 or 4 kids out at a time, cutting their rate down to where it's the same hourly rate they would be getting, but they're chopping it by 4. That's the way it should be done. Yeah. And I'll get junior golf parents that are like, well, I don't want my player to go out with Bob. He's not as good. It's like, that's what you want to see. You want to see the ball going into dumb places and watching the instructor, assuming they know what they're doing, talk them through how to make better decisions. Like that's actually what you want. You want 3 or 4 kids in a playing lesson.
I like it. Hey, Scott, you've been great. I'll let you get to the rest of your day, mate. And
I appreciate you. Appreciate coming on. Decade.golf at this point is the easiest way to find it. Thank God we finally got that website up. I appreciate your time. Cross your fingers. I sell this house. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. See you, man.